Hello, everybody. Welcome again to another edition of the GD Report. I am D,
And I'm Gene.
and we are sitting pretty 6 days, almost 5 days until the election
Yep.
of 2020, the actual election day, I should say, because as we've talked about on previous podcasts, the election has already been occurring for almost a month now, where ballots have been cast all around the country. People are mailing in ballots and dropping off ballots, voting early in person. So nice to see. There's record breaking lines. Looks like going to be an all-time record, and that's important because this is one of the most important elections of all time. So
Yeah.
we're gonna kind of round robin it. We try our best on these podcasts to come up with singular topics, but there's so much going on in the news. It's hard to stick to one topic. So we're gonna start in the heart of the country. We're gonna go to corn country and Omaha, Nebraska. Bruce Springsteen had a great album called Nebraska.
Right.
And it's kind of fitting that we mention that because a lot of the songs Bruce sang on that album had to do with killing and with destruction. And so, why don't you tell us, G Man, what happened last night in Omaha?
Well, Mr. Trump had a big rally on a airport tarmac, and by all accounts, he had thousands of people out. Nebraska is a pretty uh, reliable red state, and he made his speech and talked for a little bit and left. And they were supposed to be buses come to take the throngs of people out back to the terminal, and no buses ever came. And so people just sat out there for hours, kind of freezing their rear ends off, and at least 7 people had to be taken to the hospital for hypothermia.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of older people in the crowd
Right.
and couldn't walk the distance it took to their car. But even the younger people, I saw read a report by one of the authorities there that said that younger people shouldn't even been walking out in that weather. It was too cold. So the campaign's blaming the local authorities. The local authorities are blaming the campaign. And meanwhile, uh, when news coverage is getting sparser and sparser to get because we're getting closer and closer, and hours and minutes are ticking away, the story from the Trump campaign is yet another controversy that didn't have to happen.
Right. There is one piece of news out of Pennsylvania I want to throw in real quick. The Supreme Court refused for the second time now to change Pennsylvania's election rules, and that's basically a defeat for the Republicans. And they're allowing the election day deadline for absentee ballots to be November the 6th, which is what Pennsylvania's law declares. So uh, the Republicans are kind of ticked about that, but
Was Barrett seated for that vote? Or
yes.
I don't know if it was a vote. It was they wouldn't hear the case. I think the case too. I did see that right before we came on air. I believe the case was they determined they would not fast track the case.
Right.
Doesn't mean that they can't make an argument in a lower court and eventually get there and possibly by next week.
Right.
Boy, they are trying hard in Pennsylvania not to count the ballots.
Yes, it's just amazing what they do for voter suppression. And you'd think that you'd want more people to vote, but they sure don't seem to be inclined that way.
Yeah, I had that conversation one time. This was probably 10 years ago with a political friend of mine in the state of Massachusetts. And we were talking about voting, and he happened to be from the more conservative side of the aisle. And I made the statement. I said, well, we need to do everything we can to get more people out to vote. And he said, no, I don't agree. I only think the informed people should be out to vote. And I said, well, by informed, I'm taking that to mean the people who agree with your political positions. Is that correct?
Right.
And he didn't really want to give me an answer to that. But yeah, it's crazy to me that, especially in a pandemic, that we ever would want to say we're not going to count the ballots.
Right.
So
I'm with you.
interesting time. All right, let's jump over now and talk about some of the Senate races that we got going on. We've done a lot of updates on the Senate. We're going to give a little bit of love to the House finally tonight, but part of that's because the balance of power in the Senate is up for question this time, and it's not really up for question in the House.
Right.
But why don't we start down? Let's try to warm up a little bit and start in the state of Arizona. Tell us what's happening there.
Sure. So, as we've talked about before, we've got former astronaut Mark Kelly running on the Democratic side and running against current senator. She was appointed to that seat, Martha McSally. McSally lost her first run for the Senate to Kristen Sinema, and then she got appointed to John McCain's seat. And so, by all accounts, she's running a fairly terrible campaign. And Kelly is past the 50% threshold now. Gravis Marketing has him up 50 to 45, and Ipsos has him up 51 to 44. So it looks like that is going to be a dim pickup seat come Tuesday.
Yeah, I don't know who she's getting her advice from, but they should be fired.
Right.
Because for the second time, she did it first in the debate, and then she wrote an op-ed for FoxNews.com today that came out where she attacked Mark Kelly for leading a charity that no one knows the origin of, according to her, that is trying to take away our Second Amendment rights. And anybody who knows the history of that knows the fact that he started that nonprofit to educate people about gun safety and gun violence because his wife, former Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords, was the victim of an attempted assassination and getting shot in the head.
Right.
And it's just crazy to me that she thinks that could be a winner.
Yeah, I just, sometimes you kind of shake your head about what politicians do, and they seem to be out of touch with reality. And I think that, that stance, I think McSally thinks it'll shore up her base and maybe put her over the top, but I just don't see it. There's enough people in Arizona that know that story and know the backstory, and
yeah,
they're not going to support her.
There are other ways to campaign on that, even on that very issue in Arizona, to talk about, if someone at the rally had a gun, those kinds of things, they've been able to use it legally, those kinds of things. But to attack him for the origin of that charity, come on, she's what another buddy of mine calls a flailing politician that realizes that power is quickly fleeting away from her.
Yep.
All right. How about the state of South Carolina? Your good old buddy, Lindsey Graham, who I've seen his TV appearances lately. I think that guy has a really strong future begging for money on the side of the street.
Right. Or in the airports like the Harry Christmas used to do.
Yeah.
If anybody's going back to the airports anytime soon. But, Jamie Harrison has run a really good campaign. He's raised a lot of money. But the current polls show him on the downside right now. Graham has a 49 to 47% lead, according to the East Carolina University poll. Data for Progress has it tied at 46. So it's going to be a close race in South Carolina. We'll have to check this again on Monday and see how things are looking going into Tuesday. And, see if Jamie Harrison can't pull it out. I think it's going to be, turnout. If it's bad weather, Democrats usually turn out and Republicans don't. So we'll see how the hurricane is going to impact that. I think the hurricane is supposed to hit tomorrow or Friday, so it might not have a big impact on Election Day.
Well, my cable company is already using an excuse for our cable being out in Oklahoma, our cable internet, I should say. I don't have cable.
Right. And it hasn't
being out in Oklahoma. And
it hasn't even made landfall yet, has it?
Has not, and I don't want to mention their name, Cox Communications. But
Right.
All right, the one thing I will point out about that particular seat is, let's see, I was trying to find the. Let's see here. In that particular seat with with Lindsey Graham. And sorry for fumbling around on that when I was looking for the name, but Bill Bledsoe he actually had the nomination of the Constitution Party and the Libertarian Party, and he has withdrawn from the election. However, the Lincoln Project is running some pretty catchy ads for him saying he's the only conservative choice, and the goal being to siphon off some support from Graham.
Right.
And it could work in South Carolina because I know for a fact people are sick and tired of Lindsey Graham, and that's not
Right.
just anecdotal. They're sick and tired of him. I think he is pretty damn lucky that his reelection fell in a presidential race or a presidential year, because I think if he was off presidential ballot, I think he'd probably be down double digits now, because people wouldn't be thinking about a national election or a high profile anything like that, and so they wouldn't have the Republican coattails to be able to depend on.
Right. Yeah, and it looks like Trump is going to carry that state pretty heavily.
Although I
So,
don't think it's as heavily as it was last time.
right.
All right, let's
he's
talk.
up by 8. He's up by 8% right now.
Yeah.
Trump is.
What's how about the state of Georgia? What are you hearing out of Georgia?
Yeah, Georgia's an interesting take. They've got 2 Senate seats up for election this year, and Raphael Warnock is a Democrat, and he's leading in all the polls. Now, the thing is, in that race, that's the jungle primary, right? That's what they call it.
Yep.
And that means in order to avoid a runoff, you have to get 50.1% of the vote, or else you're going to go into a runoff. Well, if this seat goes into a runoff, then the Republican candidate has a better chance of winning, because the base kind of coalesces around that and comes out stronger. But currently, Monmouth University, which is usually a pretty good poll, has Warnock over the 50% threshold. He's up 52 to 45 over Collins, and then 51 to 45 over Loeffler. So that seat could definitely end up in the Democrats' hands.
Let me just talk about that one real quick. The only problem I have with that Monmouth poll is the fact that they're not polling everybody together. They're doing head-to-heads, and it's not a head-to-head election like you talked about. So
right.
The last number I saw had Warnock about 47, 48, somewhere in there, and
Right.
it had the 2 Republicans 20 and 22%. And we've talked about this before, but Democrats have been pushing for former educator Matt Lieberman to drop out and endorse Warnock,
Right.
but so far he's refusing to do so.
Well, it might be too late now, because a lot of people have already voted.
Could be, and he was polling about 8%, but that 8% would have put Warnock over the top. So
Right.
Now let's go to the other seat, which is David Perdue up for re-election.
Yeah, and his Democratic challenger, is John Ossoff, and currently that race is pretty close. Monmouth University has it 49-48 Ossoff, and so looks like they did another poll on a different day and had Ossoff up 49 to 46. So, and that's a winner take all right there, right?
So, no, I think Georgia law, they still have to get to 50% plus one.
Okay.
One vote. So you could, and I think we touched on this last time or a couple times ago, you could have a scenario where the Senate could be, let's say, 49-49 and 2 Georgia seats in January runoffs.
Right.
Like I said, the Atlanta TV markets are salivating for that.
Oh yeah, for that extra revenue.
Yeah, that'll make their 2021 budget for sure.
Yeah.
Well, so it's, but to me, it's really interesting that we talked about this a little bit pre-broadcast, but the fact that you can tell which states are still in play by where the candidates are. The fact that Biden did 2 campaign stops yesterday in Georgia tells me that he believes he's got a strong chance to win. And they weren't both in Atlanta, by the way. I think one was in Atlanta, one was in Warm Springs, Georgia.
Yeah, I remember he was in Warm Springs.
And so pretty powerful statement that he is actually there and campaigning. And while we're on that topic, I know there's been Trump's been in the press lately for a lot of his stops, but he's been mentioning and he's been visiting parts of states that should be pretty strong Trump country, which
Yep.
tells me that like Erie, Pennsylvania, Western PA ought to be strong, strong Trump. And he did a rally there. And he's been saying in his stump speech that he really hadn't planned on being in these parts of the country. And he really didn't want to be, but he is. And so they better go vote for him. And
Right.
so,
Well, I know
uh,
he was in um, Nebraska because the reason he was in Nebraska is because Nebraska splits their electoral votes, and they think they could siphon off one of those, and they think that actually might be the difference maker in the electoral college.
yeah. Yeah, that district right around Omaha has gone blue in the past. And there's also Maine does the same thing. There's a district upstate Maine that's more
Right.
conservative too, that typically goes that way. So, all right, let's see. Any other Senate seats you want to talk about?
No, I mean, we could look at the Texas Senate seat if you want. Zip down there real quick. I don't expect, it's 45-40. John Cornyn over MJ Hagar. That's a Univision University of Houston Latino Decisions North Star Opinion Research Poll.
Did they get anybody else in that title?
Right.
What? How come the GD report wasn't added to that title?
Right. And that concluded on the 25th. Data for Progress did a survey October 22nd to the 25th and has it closer, Cornyn 48, Hagar 46. Let me check the presidential poll here. Trump is up in Texas 1.8%. It looks like Biden is starting to trend down a little bit. I don't expect Texas to go blue this election cycle, and I don't expect John Cornyn to lose that seat. So,
well, I'm gonna go a lot more bullish than that and say that I think Hagar and Biden are both gonna win Texas.
Well, you could be right. It's both within the margin of error.
The voter turnout there has been crazy. You're
Right.
seeing a lot of first time voters. You're seeing a lot of Latinx voters that haven't voted before, felt like their vote didn't make a difference. And so you're seeing Beto O'Rourke really organize his coalition that came out last time. And it kind of is a good segue for us to talk about the House of Representatives, because
Yeah.
when you talk about a lot of those House races, and I'm not going to get too granular on the House because there are obviously 435 seats to talk about. But when you start talking about, in particular, the state of Texas, you have got, dig in a little bit here. Let me pull my spreadsheet open. But when you start pulling those House races open, you've got in the toss-up category, you've got two open seats in Texas and one with Chip Roy in Texas 21, which the Democrats have a really good chance of winning because they've got former state representative Wendy Davis, no relation, that gave the impassioned speech for abortion rights on the floor of the Texas legislature wearing her tennis shoes, filibustered for hours a few years ago,
Yep,
ran for governor against Rick Perry. I believe it was against Rick Perry.
Yeah, I think
but
it was.
She's a great candidate running for Texas 21. So you got Texas 21, Texas 22, and Texas 24, 22 and 24 being open. There's some really big potential for pickups. And you see a lot of retirements on the Republican side. Indiana 5's open, Michigan 3's open,
Right.
New York 2's open. And so you've got all this potential really for where Republicans opted not to run this time.
Right. Well, then you've got Colorado District 3, where Boebert defeated what was Scott Tipton. So Lauren Boebert, she runs a restaurant on the Western Slope over by Grand Junction that the staff openly carry guns on their hips, and there's shotguns on the wall, and it's a GOPer's dream place to eat. She defeated Scott Tipton, the incumbent, in the Republican primary, and now she's facing Democrat Diane Mitch Bush, who's from Steamboat Springs, um, and that's going to be a tight race. Democrats could definitely pick that up as well.
Yeah, North Carolina's got two open seats too that are in the likely Democrat column. When you
Right.
look at the spread across the seats, you've got 25 seats that are in the or the not open, excuse me, in the toss-up category. 9 of those being Democrat, 16 Republican, and 1 independent. So there's a lot of potential there for both sides, but a lot more potential for the Republicans to lose seats than there are for Democrats. I know you saw a little bit higher number than this, but the last prediction I saw from Cook Political Report showed that the Democrats are now likely to pick up between 5 and 15 seats.
Yeah. Well, I think, I know that Trump is campaigning saying they're going to take back the House, but everything I've seen says they're not only are they not going to take back the House, but the Democrats are going to gain seats. The number I saw was 21, and that may be a little bit of wishful thinking, but for sure they're going to pick up at least 5, and as you said, probably as many as 15.
Yeah, we've got a hot race right now in the district that I live in, OK5, which has incumbent Kendra Horn, who was a first-term incumbent, up against State Senator Stephanie Bice. And Horn is she ran a really great campaign last time and beat a 2-term, I believe it was, member of Congress, if not 3-term, Steve Russell, who was actually in the Army battalion. He was one of the people that captured Saddam Hussein in his bunker or his little hole he was hiding in Iraq, and ran a gun manufacturing business in Midwest City, and so he's kind of a dream candidate for conservative Republican country. But last time he was pretty disinterested. He ran for re-election, but he thought he had it in the bag. He only agreed to one debate with Kendra Horn, and she pretty much spanked him in that. And then people were just like, we like her energy, and she won the seat. So it's a competitive seat. The last poll I saw had the challenger, the Republican, up by about 2 to 3 points, but it was within the margin of error. And Horn has that ability to really motivate the Oklahoma City population, which is a lot more metro, of course.
Right.
This district is one of those funky gerrymander districts, gets out into Pottawatomie County and some of the smaller counties. So there's definitely some rural vote, but it wouldn't shock me at all if Horn wins re-election. She's done a good job distancing herself from Nancy Pelosi, which you have to do in Oklahoma to win.
Right.
Bice has spent a lot of her time trying to tie her to Nancy Pelosi. But then Horn and some of the DCCC have done a nice job of tying Bice to our very unpopular former governor, Mary Fallin.
Right.
And so her name still gets people worked up in Oklahoma because she's so unpopular as a governor. So it'll be an interesting down to the election night on that particular race.
Yeah, that'd be interesting to watch. Any other House races you're looking at?
Those are the main ones. I'm going to really be watching those seats in North Carolina and Texas, because I think that's going to tell us, those seats in Texas are going to tell us a lot about the statewide vote in Texas.
Right.
And you've got Latina candidates, I believe, running for the other 2 seats besides the Wendy Davis seat. So it's going to be a lot of fun to watch those particular seats and see what happens. Nancy Pelosi has already mentioned she's running for re-election as Speaker, and so we'll see what happens.
Right.
All right. Well, this is getting us close to wrapping up, but I've got a few other topics I'd like to talk about.
Sure.
Number one, let's talk about some of Bob Woodward has been dropping some more tapes, and a tape came out today where White House advisor, and I'm going to use that in air quotes, Jared Kushner, said that on the tape that Trump was, quote, taking the country back from the doctors back in April of this year,
Right.
and going to reopen the country and take it back from the doctors. And so when I heard that, it just made me cringe, because again, reminds me of those old safety signs that they used to hang in factories where they'd say, 0 days without a safety incident.
Right.
It's like the Trump campaign can't go one single day without having a campaign embarrassment.
Right. And yet the race seems to be fairly close.
Closer than you would think it would be, but
Yeah.
I think that's what happens sometimes when you have steak and chicken on the menu.
Yep. Yeah, you're right about that.
And then another interesting story I saw was, did you see who is going to be an elector from the state of New York in the Electoral College this year?
Don't tell me Rudy Giuliani.
Nope, not Rudy. Good guess, though. Very good guess. I think Rudy's got his hands full right now. Let's just put it that way.
Right.
Uh, former Senator and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton is going to be a Democratic
Oh,
elector.
wow. Right.
So I have a feeling that they released that information today just to mess with an audience of one.
Right. Donald Trump.
Yeah. So we've got, like I said, we've got almost 5 days before the election. So it's the tension's starting to get palpable. I think everybody's, if you haven't voted, be sure and make a plan. I will tell you this, if you haven't mailed your ballot in by this point, I would look for an alternative option in your state. Most states allow you to either drop it off at either a drop box or drop it off at a polling place or a county election board. Check your state rules for what is acceptable. But at this point, if there's any way you can avoid mailing it, I would avoid that just because of some of the tomfoolery going on with the U.S. Postal Service.
Right. Well, a Washington judge just ordered the post office to reinstate overtime and do whatever it takes to ensure the mail is delivered on time. Now, whether they comply with that or not remains to be seen. My guess is they won't, even though they'll say they will, and there's no way for the court to really check them on that.
Yeah, I have a feeling they're going to slow walk that, and then they'll just say we were doing everything we could to comply, but we just couldn't get it implemented fast enough.
Right. And then, so really, I think at this stage of the game, putting your ballot in the mail is basically ensuring that it won't get counted. So either go to the polls or use the drop box.
Absolutely. And then the last thing, just a couple of points of personal privilege. I want to say rest in peace to a couple of Texas music legends that passed away this week.
One of my favorites.
Jerry Jeff Walker, who's actually a native of Oneonta, New York, where he was born, but for all intents and purposes was the king of Austin, Texas. And rest in peace, Jerry Jeff. And then also we got news today that Billy Joe Shaver passed away, native of Corsicana, Texas, and a longtime resident of Waco. And Billy Joe, I never met Jerry Jeff, but I met Billy Joe and I knew him and had a chance to visit with him. And I remember one time when I was going through a particular hard period of my life, he gave me a hug and he said, "I love you." And I just figured he was just saying it because there was a lot of people waiting to talk to him. And then he held me back. He looked me in the eye and he said, "I really mean it. I love you." And he said, "Hang in there." So just a great guy. Really lived the outlaw life a few years ago. Got into a fight with a guy outside of a club, even though Billy Joe was at the time, I think he was in his late 60s, and he shot the guy in the head.
Oh,
And
wow.
the guy lived, but Billy Joe was on trial for attempted murder and actually was found not guilty due to self-defense. And as any good country artist would do, Billy Joe wrote a song about it and called it "Wacko from Waco."
Well, I have a Jerry Jeff Walker story to share if you think we got time.
Absolutely.
So I was dating this young woman, and she was a big Jerry Jeff fan, as was I. And he was coming to the Fairmount Hotel there in Dallas, and he played this small little room, probably maybe 250 people. And a friend of mine was the PR director there, and so she got me 2 tickets. And when she told me, she goes, can't guarantee where you're going to be sitting, but you'll at least be in the room. And I'm like, okay. So we get there. They take us over to our seats, and we're at the very back of the room. And of course, we're excited. We're just in the show, and there wasn't really a bad seat. And then the maitre d' comes over and says, "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to come with me." And I thought that there'd been some sort of mix-up, and they had actually given our seats to somebody else, and we were being escorted out. Instead, we were being escorted to a table right in front of the stage.
Wow.
So Jerry Jeff came out and played, and he was doing one number, and he walked down the stage, took my date by the hand, walked her up on stage, and proceeded to dance with her for about 2.5 minutes until the song was over. And so just great memories. I loved his work, and was hoping to get to see him again. He had a show scheduled at Green Hall in New Braunfels, but his cancer forced that to be canceled, and so we didn't get to go down to see him. But yeah, definitely two great musicians that have passed on. And they'll be
Absolutely. 2020 can't go away soon enough.
Amen to that. Amen to that.
All right, man. Well, great job tonight, and hope everybody enjoyed it again. Just drop us a line, argue with us, tell us if we're right, tell us if we're wrong. We're gonna have at least one more podcast, and if everything goes well, we're gonna do our best to be live. If the ice storm and the hurricane and whatever other excuse the internet companies want to provide doesn't
Right.
keep us from doing it, but election night, we're gonna do everything we can to be live.
Yep. All right. We'll see you in a day or so.
Care,
Good night,
everybody.
everybody.